Good morning. I'm Javier Alberto Soto, the President and CEO of the Denver Foundation. Now that the 2023 legislative session is over, we can all take a big, deep breath. Welcome, and thank you for joining us in the special Leading and Learning event. Today is about reflecting on what happened this session with bills passed, which didn't, and why. Plus all the behind-the-scenes chisme or gossip that we've all been waiting to hear. We're joined by two legislative leaders who were behind a lot of the work that took place over the past several months at the state capitol. And we greatly appreciate their taking the time to be with us this morning.
Nosotros queremos apreciar que estén con nosotros esta mañana.
Our Leading and Learning event series are about us gathering to learn
Nuestras
from one
series
another
también están
and
para
hopefully
tenernos
walking
con
away with
otros
important
y estamos
insights.
trabajando con la
I hope
parte
you enjoy the
importante.
conversation.
Esperamos que tengan esta
So to
conversación.
kick us off, here is our
Para
Director of
empezar,
Policy and
estamos
Advocacy,
con nuestra
Naomi Amaha,
directora.
who will serve as our moderator. Naomi?
Welcome everyone to our second annual legislative wrap-up. We at the Denver Foundation believe we have a responsibility to take bold steps to advance racial equity and drive meaningful systemic change to improve communities beyond Metro Denver. And one of the ways that we do this is through policy and advocacy. The Denver Foundation is pleased to share that we were successful this legislative session with most of the policy positions that we took. Today, we'll speak with two leaders who understand these issues very deeply, and we really look forward to a meaningful and thoughtful conversation that will hopefully leave everyone feeling hopeful for what is to come. And now I will introduce our panelists.
Y creo que vamos a introducir ahora a nuestros panelistas.
First up, we have Senator Julie Gonzales. Senator Majority Whip Julie Gonzales was elected to the Senate in 2018 and represents North, West, and Downtown Denver. She currently serves as the chair of the Judiciary Committee and is a member of the State Veterans and Military Affairs and Local Government and Housing Committees. She also serves as the co-chair of the Colorado Democratic Latino Caucus. As an organizer at heart, Senator Gonzales spent most of her life organizing for justice in Colorado by ensuring that working people, immigrants, young people, and Latinos are engaged in crafting legislative solutions at the Capitol and advancing policies that ensure all Colorados can live with dignity. We also have joining us today Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer. Senator Kirkmeyer has been devoted to public service for more than 3 decades. As a 5-time elected county commissioner, Senator Kirkmeyer was instrumental in helping to lead Will County to Colorado's only debt-free and tax-free county in the state. She also served as executive director of the Department of Local Affairs before she was elected to represent Senate District 23 in 2020. She has received numerous awards during her career and was recently called a Shining Star by Colorado Politics due to her legislative work this past session, as she passed more bills than any Republican lawmaker this session. Welcome to both of our panelists. We're really excited to have you both here. And first, I'm going to pose a question to Senator Gonzales. And really, we would love to hear from you on what were the biggest themes of the 2023 legislative session.
Thank you so much for the question, and thanks to everybody at the Denver Foundation for organizing this convening. It's great to see Senator Kirkmeyer here. It feels like it's been so long, and yet it feels like it's it just happened. I really think that this legislative session was one in which we were, as Democrats, trying to figure out how best to govern given the expanded majorities that we received, and in so doing, finding ways to, and sometimes work alongside our Republican colleagues, and sometimes figure out how to overcome challenges where we didn't agree. And I think particularly for me, the big themes that we sought to tackle this legislative session were really addressing the cost of housing and the availability of affordable housing, and also addressing the cost of living and working to help people who find themselves oftentimes working harder than they ever had been, and yet still struggling to make ends meet. And so that work around how to support working Coloradans, how to make housing more available, and how to address the cost of living, I really think were the themes for us this legislative session. And I'm really proud to be on this side of it, as opposed to still at the end of the legislative.
Yes. Thank you for that, Senator Gonzales. How about you, Senator Kirkmeyer? What do you feel were the biggest themes of this session?
Oh, gosh, there was a lot. So sitting on the Joint Budget Committee, to me, the biggest theme was making sure that the budget was really back in the hands of the legislators. It appeared to me, this is my first year being on the Joint Budget Committee. However, I'm familiar with the state's budget and doing budgets, but it just appeared that the governor had his hands quite a bit into the budget, and that there weren't a lot of, our legislators maybe didn't know as much about the budget as they should have. So I think working really diligently to ensure that, you know, it's the Joint Budget Committee that writes the budget, it's the General Assembly that approves the budget, and that they are engaged in the budget was important to me. And I thought that was a big theme, you know, ensuring that we didn't have a structural deficit, that we were really leaning towards good government, and how do we all work together on that. So I felt really pretty good about that. But and along with that, you know, being in the minority was not fun, but happy to be able to work with some of my colleagues across the aisle and get some really good things done. But obviously affordability, housing, those were big themes, big issues. I mean, the governor spoke for about 45 minutes to an hour in his State of the State address about affordable housing. And then land use, which was, I'm sure we're gonna have some more questions about it, but that was interesting how that all played out. I think missed opportunity was there, but we still have work to do. And then also education and public safety are both still two huge themes that I hear from my constituents that they're still concerned about is, do they feel safer now in their community? And I'm not so sure that they do, but I think that's a theme that we have to continue to working on. And then with regard to education, we have a constitutional mandate to fund a free public school education. We also have a constitutional mandate to fund it at a certain level. And we have not been meeting our obligation for quite some time now, since 2009, 2010, in that time frame. So working to really ensure that we fully bought down what is called the budget stabilization factor. So we stop stabilizing the budget, we stop balancing the budget on the backs of education and students. I think, again, it was another very important thing that we need to get to, because before we can truly hold our public school system accountable for educating our children, we've got to be able to say that we are actually doing our job and funding it.
Right. Thank you both for that. And I appreciate some of the things that you brought up, because we're going to dig a little bit deeper as we get into the programming. Senator Kirkmeyer, I'll continue with you. What is one bill or just effort this legislative session that you're most proud of? And that could be something you brought forward, a bill that you maybe voted for, or something that was a priority for your caucus. What's that kind of shining star for the year?
You know, that's I know we knew the question was coming, and it's a tough one, because there were several pieces of legislation that I felt really very proud of. And a couple of those we're working with Senator Gonzales on, which I'm sure people are kind of somewhat surprised, but I think this year our relationship actually grew into a really great place, where we were able, you know, we're not going to agree on everything, but there are things that we can come together on and agree on, and really work towards the benefit of all Coloradoans. So for me, some of my legislation that I really pushed forward was, again, had to do with education. And it wasn't necessarily my bill. The School Finance Act was not my bill, but my amendment that had us buy down $180 million out of the $321 million that we owe, I think was huge. I mean, I tried to get the whole thing, but that didn't work out. But getting to $180 million, and also getting further amendment on the School Finance Act that said we will pay our bill fully funding education next year. I think, especially when I know that we have the amount of funds that we have in reserves and fund balances, that we were able to afford it even this year. But knowing that we are going to keep our promise and do what we're supposed to be doing as legislators, to me, that amendment was extremely important. And then I was on a bill, creating the Office of School Safety. That's an extremely important bill, I believe. Again, it's about providing safety in our schools. You know, we've seen all the violence that has occurred in some of our schools, and it's not just about gun violence, but about other things as well. But, you know, we need to ensure that our schools are safe, not just for our students, but also for our teachers, and making sure that we have a learning environment where kids and teachers feel safe, that they can teach and that they can learn and that they get the best opportunity that they can towards an education.
Thank you. How about you, Senator Gonzales? What's that shining star issue that you worked on this session?
Thank you for the question. And I will start by saying that, you know, for as often as the pundits will like to say, oh, we're so strident or so far apart or what have you, the ways in which we find ways to come together across the aisle in order to do what's right for all Coloradans is really, I think, an important part of this legislative session. And, you know, I found myself voting for Kirkmeyer amendments. I found myself, you know, partnering and supporting some of the policy ideas that she and the other Republicans brought to the table, and which is a I think surprising thing for me to say. You know, in that vein, though, one of the pieces of policy that I found myself being most proud of this legislative session was one that was important to me because of the way in which we are seeing access to abortion care, reproductive rights, and access to gender affirming care be politicized nationally. And so this year, there's a package of policies. The bill that I was honored to carry protected patients, providers, assisters of that reproductive health care. Again, whether we're talking about access to gender affirming care or access to abortion care, or for folks who are pro-life, their ability to make their own decision about their bodies without any politician getting in the way, right? And so really being able to expand those protections in light of the way in which we're seeing the issue be politicized across the country, I think was just a real crowning achievement. And I think a real exciting moment for me this legislative session. You know, certainly I worked on a lot of housing policy this session, and bills that didn't make it through to the finish line. Just cause eviction, House Bill 1171 was a policy that I carried. Senate Bill 213 was not my bill, but I put a ton of work in that policy, as did actually Senator Kirkmeyer as well. And I'm sure we'll get into that policy more deeply. But I think just as important as the bills that made it across the finish line is to talk about the things that didn't.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for those comments. And it leads me into my next question, which you both alluded to, but you know, you both sit on different sides of the aisle as we think about political affiliations. And you talked a lot about how you all have supported each other in terms of your votes and coalition building. How do you bridge that divide and work together, especially where there might be times where you didn't agree and, you know, maybe there's some challenges that have come from that. But love for you to start with you, Senator Gonzales, on how do you do that work and do it really well, which it seems it's happening between the two of you explicitly.
You know, I always say that if you know, I say this to my Democratic colleagues, I say this to my Republican colleagues, honesty is really important. You stab me in the front and we're good. Stab me in the back, we got problems, right? And so that requires direct and honest and open communication. I like this about your policy. I got a problem with this about your policy. There's no way I'm ever going to vote yes on that, or there's no way I would ever not vote yes on that, right? But having that dialogue is really important. And I think sometimes this has happened, right? Where I will be, that if my position is taken for granted, or if my vote is just assumed without having a conversation with me, sometimes folks will find themselves surprised, right? And I say that, you know, for instance, when it comes to land use, right? Folks may assume that because I live 2 blocks north of the Broncos Stadium, I represent the heart of downtown Denver and the north side and the west side of Denver. Folks may just assume that I don't understand rural issues. They may not know that I grew up on a ranch, that my family hails from Southern Colorado, right? And that those issues are deeply ingrained in my family. And so being able to have those conversations is critically important. And then being honest, right? To say like, I agree with you on this, or you know what, you're actually right on that. And being able to partner moving forward. There was actually a policy that Senator Kirkmeyer ran this legislative session that you know, was sent to my committee, probably with the assumption that it wouldn't move forward, it wouldn't come out of my committee. And yet, when I dug in on the policy merits, I was like, you know what, there's something there. We probably need to work on some amendments. And we did. But that was that I was really proud of that work to get it out of the Senate chamber. And so that to me is part of a really important part of that process is open communication.
Thank you. How about you, Senator Kirkmeyer? What's important to you as we think about how you bridge divides and work together?
And thank you. I appreciate the question. And, you know, for me, you know, when you walk into, when I walked into the legislature as a state senator, you have to walk in respecting everyone. You walk in with a general respect for everyone. And that's where you need to start. You know, we all don't necessarily, we're not going to agree on everything. Even in your own caucus, you don't agree on everything. You don't necessarily even have to like each other, but you do have to treat each other with respect. And I know I had a couple of conversations on the Senate floor where I spoke about that, about, you know, how we act as state senators. This is a elected position and we should all be honored to have it, and we should guard it very safely and protect it, especially when we're on the Senate floor, and how we act on the Senate floor and how we act with each other. So it's walking into the legislature and saying, like, I'm going to respect you no matter what. We're going to have a respect, but there also has to be, as Senator Gonzales said, a truthfulness, integrity. Really the only thing you have down there is your honesty, is your word. And if you break that word, I'm the same as Senator Gonzales. You know, if you break that word and you stab me in the back, then I'm pretty much not going to respect you anymore, and we're done. And I am done. And I think Senator Gonzales is pretty much the same way. I mean, it's something I think we have kind of in common. But, you know, you have to enter it with honesty and truthfulness and respect. And you do that by telling people the truth. You know what? If I don't like your bill, I'm going to tell you I don't like your bill. If there's something in your bill I think I can work on, I want to tell you I want to work with you on your bill. And as Senator Gonzales said, pretty much any bill that a Republican puts forward, I'm thinking it doesn't matter what committee it goes through, it's probably going to get killed. So it's always nice when you have something where people are willing to look at you and say, okay, this woman has been truthful with me. I can trust her, even though she's on the other side of the aisle. And I think the same way. There were several bills, quite honestly, that Senator Gonzales and I worked on that some of them were mine, a couple of them were hers. We had amendments to them. We were open to amendments. I think that's the other place, at least specifically from, you know, the Republican side, the minority side. You've got to be open to amendments. You got to be open to finding that common ground, because there is common ground on a lot of these issues, and let's go find it. Because again, we're back to what is in true benefit for all of the citizens of Colorado. Because even though I'm elected from a state Senate, you know, I have my district, Julie has her district. We're not there just representing that district. We're supposed to be there as a state senator, not a district senator. So, and then the other thing I tell newbies coming in, you know, friends that are Republicans that come in, it's like, look, don't take anything personal and don't make it personal, because that's not what this is about. We're supposed to be down here thinking what is the best interest of all Coloradoans, what's in the best interest of our state. So again, you go in with respect, honesty, trust, you gain trust. I know we had a couple of bills, Senator Gonzales and I did. One, I think the one she was talking about was the banning non-disclosure agreements. And, you know, I had to go back to her committee a couple times, but we worked out amendments that made it work, and that made the bill better, quite frankly. So that's great. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Senator Gonzales had a bill about DACA recipients, DACA people. And, you know, I heard her bill, actually, Representative Armagast was the Republican sponsor on the House side, and I heard him talk about the bill, went and looked it up, and I noticed that Senator Gonzales was the Senate sponsor and that she didn't have a Republican sponsor on it. And I went to her and asked her, I said, I would really love to be on your bill, and would you accept me on? And she said yes. And she asked me why, and I told her why. I mean, I live in the Fort Lupton area, and, you know, I had some of my children's friends that were in this situation where, you know what, they thought they were Americans, they identify as Americans, yet we weren't able to treat them as Americans, and they want to serve their community. The bill was a great bill. And when I jumped on, I have to tell you, a couple of my Republican colleagues were like, what the heck are you doing? It's like, this is important to Coloradoans. These are people who are part of our community, and we need to respect that. So we had a lot of bills that we worked on. Even, I know we're going to probably talk a little bit more about 213, but believe it or not, I think Senator Gonzales and I were pretty darn close. And I think, you know, where we were in our position on that bill, and I think it has to go back to trust. We were able to build trust over the last couple of years. Certainly this year, I think we added on to that, and just having those great conversations and be able to trust each other's point of view, and then trust to say, hey, maybe we should look at it this way. And I think that's important. So it's about respecting, no matter if your colleague is Republican or Democrat, no matter where they're at, respecting their position. We all fought hard to get here, and it's her vote or it's my vote. And I respect that. And I want to go have that conversation. And I think having that open line of communication is extremely important as well.
Wonderful. Thank you both. That's one thing our attendees take away. It's just the values and how that drives you both in your work. So trust and respect and honesty, folks. All right, so we're going to get into a couple policy positions that the foundation took, and we're going to jump right in with Senate Bill 213, famously known as the Land Use Bill. And this was a big deal. I talked to a lot of different elected officials and other community members, and the number one thing that there's on top of mind is housing. And so essentially what Senate Bill 213 would have done would really change how our state goes about zoning to ensure, to help promote different types of housing to be built. This is a bill that had, 11 hours of testimony, I think 1,300 different stakeholders that had taken a position on the bill, and it died on the very last day of session. So I want to start with you, Senator Kirkmeyer, and then jump in with Senator Gonzales. What transpired this session around this bill, and what do you think we can expect next session as we think about housing and zoning reform?
So I think what transpired around this bill is it was done behind closed doors. I don't think it, stakeholder processing, I think, means maybe something different to everyone, but to me, it means everybody was engaged and they would have known what was coming out with regard to the bill when it was being introduced. I'm not so sure that the sponsor knew everything that was in his bill. I'm not so sure that he even liked everything in his bill. But I certainly know that the Colorado Municipal League, so cities and cities, and then the Colorado Counties Inc., so counties, they didn't know it was in that bill when it dropped. And the bill drops, and all of a sudden we're in committee, and then we're having 11 hours the first go around, and myself and Senator Gonzales were in that committee. And then we get, we had a 3-hour, wasn't it like 3 or 4 hour senatorial fight, which to me is ridiculous. If your bill's not ready to go, what are you doing? I mean, we all have years. We all know how it goes to get a bill going. But anyways, I think there were, again, a lot of points of agreement. I know, like Senator Gonzales and I were both concerned about gentrification and displacement policies, and we're working to ensure that we did put in displacement policies and understood that. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand how zoning works and how it works at the local level. My major concern with the bill was that it didn't include the public. I mean, we had a bill that, quite frankly, was written by the governor's office behind closed doors that said, look, we're going to put together a 13-member bureaucratic agency who's going to give advice and tell everybody how the rest of the state is going to look and how they're going to grow. And this completely cut out the public. And I just don't think that's right. That's not what's at the basis of land use and, comprehensive planning and master planning. And even when I asked the question with regard to, what is, how many affordable housing units do you think we're going to get to here? No one could answer the question. No one. I mean, as far as the bill sponsors could not say, this is what we're actually trying to accomplish here. Basically, it was, to me, a power grab, total infringement on local control. And then the main point of it was it took away from the public's ability to define the character of their neighborhood, of their community. To me, I was a county commissioner for 20 years. So we did land use. Everything that was in that bill, every city and county can do now, if that's what the wishes are of their community and of the citizens within their community. And I found it almost remarkable that when we were in hearing about this bill, legislators would talk about the great things occurring in their community and then vote for the bill. And it's like, well, if everything's going so well in your community, why are we voting for this bill? Why aren't we strengthening? I mean, there were some good things in the bill that I could really support. And quite frankly, Senator Moreno, who carried the bill in the Senate, put in an amendment that looked a heck of a lot like my strike below amendment. And so, I was able to support a lot of it, the things with the housing needs assessment and the planning going around that. Those were all great things and needed things. So I was disappointed, quite frankly, that the bill did die on the last day. And the reason it died is because the governor said it was either his way or no way. And so he got no way, because we missed an opportunity here to really work with and partner with elected officials in cities, in counties, to ensure that we are looking at housing and affordable housing, not just on a local basis, but how do we look at across the state on a regional basis? Because one of the other problems with the bill was it didn't cover the whole state, and it ended up only covering like 16 communities. That's not the whole state. You have to have the whole state working together if we're really truly going to address this issue. And you need to have cities and counties and special districts, quite frankly, at the table, helping to find those solutions. So again, I think it's unfortunate. I think we've missed an opportunity, but I think that opportunity is still there. I know I'm not going to sit around and wait for the governor to write another bill behind closed doors and not talk to anybody really about it. I know he didn't talk to any of the Republicans, which is to be expected, but he didn't really talk to any Democrat legislators either until the last few days. And I think that's wrong. You don't wait till the end of the session to do major policy, public policy, and then try to push it through without really listening to anyone from either side of the aisle.
Thank you, Senator Kirkmeyer. Senator Gonzales, would love to hear your take, and especially hear about the work that you did to strengthen the bill and what you think the future could look like on this topic.
Thank you so much. It was actually really interesting for me to hear Senator Kirkmeyer's perspective on the policy, because for me, as a person who lives in an affordable housing unit, as a person who represents the north side of Denver, that faced tremendous amounts of gentrification and transformation, that was a local control-based decision, right? So much of this policy was seeking to, the affordable housing unit in which I live is part of a 60-unit building here on the north side of Denver, 2 blocks north of the Broncos Stadium, right? And so we've seen some ways in which Denver has done tremendous work as a local jurisdiction. And yet, just on the other side of Sheridan, right, Lakewood has enacted an anti-growth initiative, right, via ballot measure. And so that has created even more pressure on folks on the east side of Sheridan, in my district in Denver, to do more, right? And so I know that there was deep discussion and debate and consternation and lots of feelings around, should this be a statewide decision? Should we create a baseline at the state level or not? And then from there, what sorts of decisions should flow from that? Regardless of where the decision is being made, whether that's in a local municipality or whether that's at the state level, for me, ensuring that folks who have lived in a certain community for generations, who have put down roots in a local community, should be able to continue to live there, whether that's as renters or as homeowners, right? In my community, we hear lots of stories about people who express a lot of hurt and regret around the ways that their community was pushed out from under them, right? And so this idea that only local control is the way to address these policies, I think actually misses the mark. And so in that, I ran a number of amendments in order to strengthen the assessments that are done, to track, where are people living, and how do we, what are neighborhoods in communities that are susceptible to gentrification, and how do we affirmatively put policies in place to stop that from happening, right? To stop displacement from occurring. I know that it looks different in Denver proper than it would in a suburban community, or than what it would look like in a rural community, right? I mentioned earlier, right? My family's from Southern Colorado. All of a sudden, La Veta, Walsenburg, Trinidad, those communities are starting to boom in ways that it has been really unprecedented for those parts of the state. And they're dealing with, on a different scale, it plays out in different ways, right? But they're dealing with some of the very same challenges. And so to me, that aspect of the conversation, critically important. How do we hold whether it's local governments and developers and the state, quite frankly, to account in order to ensure that we're actually building the affordable housing that everybody is screaming from the rooftops that we need. The other piece, though, that I think is really important that we need to continue to work through is, Senator Kirkmeyer certainly mentioned that at the end of the policymaking process, what had begun as being a statewide bill really only was sort of narrowed down in its approach and really only impacted a handful of communities, right? And to say that, building affordable housing is difficult in a mountain community, in the rural resort communities, and so let's just exempt them from anti-displacement measures. I'm sorry, what? And to try to go through and sift out, and part of the reason for folks who weren't there watching the live play-by-play, on the last day of session, or in the final days of session, the bill that had come out from the Senate and then gone over to the House was then heavily amended again, and trying to reconcile the differences between the two in the final days of session when they weren't here. They were like, I could go across the screen, right? Like they were quite far apart. And to try to, in the last few days of session, the last day of session, the last 6 hours of session, to try to say that, hey, let's all get to something that we all can live with, I think is not the best way to do policymaking. I think that the conversations that we began with this policy will continue. And I look forward to revisiting that discussion in the next legislative session. I think, honestly, that some of this, some of the politics of it, I think, could have looked different had it been across a package of bills as opposed to one ginormous beast of a bill. And I also think that we will benefit from time to have these conversations, over the course of the interim and throughout the next legislative session as well. But when this bill dropped mid-session, it was a beast. I had different colored sticky notes. I had 6 different color highlighters, and I was trying to make my way through this policy because there was a lot in it, and a lot of the conversations that need to continue. That being said, this wasn't the only housing bill that died on the calendar, and that's the other part of this as well. No one Coloradan's life would have been immediately transformed had Senate Bill 213 been signed into law on the last day of session. There were policies, however, that did die on the calendar that would have kept Coloradans housed. And so to me, to have both the long-term structural conversation and the policy conversation around the immediate needs of Coloradans was really important. And I think really disappointing that we weren't able to ultimately see either policy move forward. And it just underscores the need to continue those conversations, us as legislators, for us to do our jobs and to listen to Coloradans and to come back to the drawing board in preparation for January of next year.
Well, thank you both for being really transparent. I think a lot of folks in attendance, saw a lot of the news coverage, but didn't really get to see the the nitty gritty of all that was transpiring under the dome around this issue. So I really appreciate both of your comments. And Senator Gonzales, I'd like to continue with you around exactly what you mentioned. Another bill that died, I think, was it Sunday at like 10 or 11? I can't remember, it's all a blur, but just called eviction, a bill that you championed that would have made some immediate impacts in helping people keep them in their homes. So we'd love to invite you to share, what do you think it will take to get this passed through the next legislative session? Because we know evictions are not going down by any means. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on that important bill as it relates to protections for renters and what is to come.
Absolutely. The bill, what it sought to do at its core was to really say, hey, if you are not breaking the law, if you're paying your rent on time, if you are doing that which is being asked of you as a tenant, if you're abiding by the terms of your agreement, then you should be able to renew your lease. The landlord, can certainly, we even had language and clarified language around reasonable rent increases, right? We're not saying like, oh, this is one of the arguments from opposition to the policy was this is, backdoor rent control. We're like, no, actually, like there's language in the bill that would walk through. A landlord could certainly put forward rent increases through this policy. The idea at the root of it is to keep Coloradans housed. We went through and did a lot of work. My colleagues, Representatives Mabry and Representative Gonzales Gutierrez did a tremendous work carrying this bill through the House. And then when it came to the Senate, we worked really hard to get it out of committee to the floor, to address concerns from some of the Democrats who, my own colleagues, right, who are landlords, who said, I don't know if I want this bill to impact, my tenants, or I don't know if I want this to, I don't know if I feel comfortable with this. Addressed all of those concerns, did all of the work, ran out of time on the calendar. We had a path forward and just actually ran out of time. And that to me, my lesson learned out of that is, even though this was one of the first bills, one of the early bills, right? We still ran out of time because of the ways in which it got pegged alongside this land use conversation. And so I think moving forward, continuing this conversation is incredibly important. Eviction filings in Denver, in my community, just surpassed pre-pandemic levels. We are seeing unprecedented numbers. And because of our failure to act, Coloradans will lose their housing. And that is a bitter pill for us to swallow and a reality that we all need to own up to and face. And so, man, if we could just, I sound like Cher, if we could turn back time, you know what I mean? But we've got a lot of work to do this coming January.
We do. Thank you for that, Senator Gonzales. I know that was a bill that we were proud to support and look forward to being a part of conversations as you move forward. Senator Kirkmeyer, I'm going to turn it over to you. As noted in your introduction, Colorado Politics said you passed the most amount of policies of any Republican lawmaker. Can you share a little bit about this, what this means to you in terms of, how to move policy forward as a Republican in the current majorities? And just want to hear any thoughts around that acknowledgement.
Yeah, and that was great. Part of that has to do with, I said, on the Joint Budget Committee. I mean, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
I think three of the, maybe four, I don't know, but three of the top five folks who had the most bills passed, three of us were on the Joint Budget Committee. And that makes sense because there's a lot of bills that have to be carried. There's supplementals, all these types of things that are related to the budget. But again, even with my own bills that I introduced, I was pretty successful in getting them passed. And I think it goes back to working to find the common ground again. There is common ground, regardless of, whatever party is saying, there's common ground to be found, and you just have to go find it. And I think, I would walk in with my bill and tell people I was open to amendments. Doesn't mean I'm going to take every amendment.
Yeah.
but I was open to amendments. And I think that's important. I think that's an important place to be, because you just can't always say no, and you can't just act like you're the only one who knows how to do anything, because that's just not the way it goes. So I think you just have to be open to amendments. And then again, it goes back to, like I was saying before, about with trust. You know, there are people in the legislature that you do know that you can trust. Again, they may not agree with you, but when they're telling you something to your face, you know you can believe it, you can trust it, and you can work with it. And that makes the difference. I think I'm one of those people. I think Senator Gonzales is one of those people. And, you know, and I can name off others, but, you know, since we're both on here, I think we both are. You know, if someone comes to me or if I'm talking to them about their bill, I'm telling them to their face what I think. I'm not going to hold back. I don't think Senator Gonzales holds back either. And I think that's important. That's how you start working to figure out how to get to common ground. Because again, you can get there. So I think, you know, even my work on the Joint Budget Committee, I'm still in the minority. It's 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans. So it's doing your homework, knowing what you're talking about, being open to hearing others' suggestions, listening to what others have to say, regardless of which party they're in, and then moving forward and thinking about what is truly in the best interest of the people of Colorado. So I think that's what works. At least that's what works for me.
Thank you. All right,
Sure.
couple more questions, and then we might turn it over to some audience questions. So Senator Gonzales, another bill that you ran, the foundation supported, was House Bill 1229, which was a kind of a wonky bill, but its end goal really was to provide responsible lending options to individuals that might need what we call a small dollar loan, a couple $100s when an emergency arises. And we feel like this is a great opportunity to improve economic security for those individuals. It was also one of the most lobbied bills this session, so I'd love to hear your perspective on what it took to garner and adopt feedback from stakeholders and ultimately pass this bill.
Little did I know when I signed on to this bill that it was going to be such a beast of a policy. You know, I have worked on these sorts of consumer protection policies, financial empowerment policies for several years now. And this policy, when I first read it, I was like, well, that seems pretty straightforward. Like in 2018, Colorado voters pretty clearly and resounding, it was 70-something% of the electorate was like, yeah, we should ban payday lenders and set these limits for our interest rates. And this policy, you know, that the 2018 ballot initiative, very successful. And a lot of lenders then turned to this new product to get around some of the language of the 2018 ballot initiative. And so this policy just sought to, again, reflect the will of the voters and bring all of those small dollar loans in line with the voters' intent. They spoke real clear. This wasn't like a 51-49 kind of vote. And man, the number of fintech, financial tech companies that came out of the woodwork to say, no, was wild to me. And the number of industry folks who then said, oh, the sky will fall if you do not allow us to come forward with this incredibly complicated, can't really explain it to you on one page service that we provide. And being willing to sit down, listen to the concern, and then say, okay, this is a valid concern, this I agree with, this I don't. And taking that time to then really understand what they were concerned about as opposition to the policy, and then what we were seeking to do. I was really proud of the fact that actually just yesterday, Governor Polis signed that bill into law. I was wondering whether it was going to be signed or not, and it's now the law of the land here in the state of Colorado. And I couldn't be prouder of the work, because it means that, you know what, you may not agree 100% of the time, but if you sit down and listen, you can find a path forward.
Absolutely.
You
That's
know,
great.
could-
Oh, go ahead,
Can I just
Senator.
jump in here?
Yeah.
Something that Senator Gonzales said. Don't you just, I mean, advocates and lobbyists do this all the time. The sky is falling. I mean, it's like the world ends if you do this kind of stuff, right? And you just want to say, oh, come on. I mean, every time they say the sky is falling, I look up and I'm like, no, it's still there. You know, I mean, isn't it just amazing? I mean, I just think that's funny. So
Exactly. Where it's like, really?
it hits us all. I mean, we all get it as legislators. We all get it. Oh my God, if you don't vote for this, or if you vote for this, this is what's going to happen. The world will end tomorrow. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. It's like, no, like, stop it.
Well, yesterday, the sun rose this morning. It's all good.
Exactly. Sorry, I just had to jump in.
No, I think that's a really great point, and it's come up a lot. And I think on that one bill, someone from another state came in and said, "We're okay. Like, the sky did not fall as a result of this policy." So I appreciate you bringing that up, Senator Kirkmeyer. And I would love for you, before we get into audience questions, to share a little bit more about the bill around the Office of School Safety, what it does, how can people be involved in implementation, what should they be looking for at their local school districts, and what are the results that you hope to see as a result of this legislation?
Sure. This is just a great bill all the way around. I tell people all the time, you walk into the Capitol and it's fortified. You have to walk through security. You don't get to carry certain, weapons around, all sorts of things. I mean, we're protected at the Capitol. We'll do that at the Capitol, but we left out schools. I mean, seriously, what are we doing to fortify our schools? And that's what the Office of School Safety is about. There were a couple of, areas already, or grant programs that were already out there with regard to school safety that we pulled together and combined, and then added in things like a critical response unit at the state level. So the Department of Public Safety will be putting together a critical response unit. So what happened down in Uvalde, Texas does not happen here in Colorado. So you have that coordination kind of thing. There's also another portion of it that put together threat assessment or risk assessment teams and do training. So school districts, a lot of school districts have threat assessment teams already, but maybe they don't have all the training that's available to them, or they don't know, or they haven't been able to go to training. So the state would help and assist and provide kind of that train the trainer, train them how to really look for risks and threat assessments in their school districts, in their schools specifically. So those were a couple of additional things. And then there was the addition of grant funds to help fund some of these school safety programs and school, safety innovations, things that they want to do within their school districts to help fund those. And one of those is, again, school resource officers. I know, it's different in every school district. I'm not trying to tell every school district what they have to do. Again, that's their job. I think it's my job as a legislator to help find resources for them to help carry out some of the things that need to be done to keep our kids safe and our teachers safe, and a great learning environment, to be provided. So we were able to put some grant funds in. It started off at $6 million. And then when we were going through the budget amendments, or actually through the amendments on the floor on this bill, several legislators, or at least 3 that I can think of, and Senator Gonzales was one of those, and was able to work out with another Republican senator. We were able to work out an amendment to increase the amount of grant funding by $10 million. So got it up to $16 million. And the whole idea is really, let's just go figure out, how do we make our schools safer? How do we fortify these schools? I know one of the things that came across this year a lot was, it happens every year. After every time there's some kind of gun shooting or, mass shooting of some sort, we come back in with more bills that, affect law-abiding citizens. This just feels like, to me, some way that we can actually do something to be proactive in a way to provide safety in our schools, in our school districts, allow them to define, the school districts to define what that means in their school district and how they want to go about it, but that the state is going to provide those resources and assist them with that to ensure that we're doing everything we can to provide a safe learning and teaching environment for our students and for our teachers.
Thank you. Well, we've got a few minutes left, and I have a lot of audience questions, so I'm going to do my best to get through them. But one I want to pose to both of you is in relation to, how can local communities better prepare for the affordable housing discussions next session? And what might be some successful ways to engage residents in the process and really make sure that communities at the forefront of what type of policy intervention should be pursued?
I'll just jump in to say that this year, well, I'll start by saying that 5 years ago, when I first came to the legislature and was talking about housing issues and tenant policy, that there were very few policies. There was very little discussion happening at the Capitol. I think the pandemic really laid bare just how many Coloradans were renting. And, you know, in the before times when I had talked about renters policy, they were like, that's a Denver thing. And I think the pandemic really laid bare, one, how many Coloradans are actually renters, and two, how widespread the cost burdened Coloradans when it comes to housing really are across the state. And so that's changed the policy dynamic and conversation. What I found myself a bit frustrated by this legislative session were the number of bills, just the sheer volume of policies that were really around sometimes the very same section of statute. And that had we been more intentional on the front end to have this great idea and this great idea that are both minor policies to then be one bill as opposed to two separate bills that are running in different chambers at different parts of session. And you had to, at certain points, be real clear of like, hey, if we amend this one, is that going to impact it? Better coordination on the front end, right? And I say that because it's not only a conversation to be had with the advocacy organizations who work in the affordable housing space, that's also a conversation that we need to have with legislators, right? Because I think this was the year where everybody was like, I want to run a housing bill. That means sometimes we as legislators have to put our egos aside in order to make sure that the right policies are getting crafted in the most efficient way. And that's work that I think, so both on the advocacy side and on us as legislators, we've got some conversations to have in order to ensure that we are putting our best foot forward when it comes to policy. Those smaller, also meaningful, but smaller policies, many of them made it through, and yet the more transformative policies ran out of time.
That's a great point. And I think a note to all of us that work in this space. How about you, Senator Kirkmeyer? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think everybody putting their egos aside would be a great idea. That would be a good first start. But I would just say this to the public and to the community. If you think that the legislature is going to fix your affordable housing issue, you should probably think again. Because if I were you and I was in your position and you want to really make an effect, 213 isn't even necessary. It wasn't even necessary. We already have zoning, local governments already have zoning authority, zoning powers. They already do comprehensive planning, master planning. They're already supposed to know, how much water is available for the type of growth they want to do. They're already supposed to be working within their communities. So if it were me, and I'm, I've been involved in it for a very long time, but if it were me and I was trying to make a difference in my community myself, and I wasn't an elected local government or elected state senator or state representative, I would go directly to my city council or my board of county commissioner and ask them why they aren't creating a task force on housing and affordable housing in my community. And then I want to be a part of it. Let's have that discussion at the community level. Let's us define the character of our community, and you should be doing that with your local government officials. They have all the authority and all the power that they need right now to do everything that was already in 213. So again, that discussion needs to really happen at the local level. From a legislative or a statewide perspective, where I think legislators can assist and help, it's really talking about how do we incentivize regional coordination. So what happens in Lakewood not only impacts Denver, but it impacts Boulder County, it impacts Arvada, it will impact Aurora, it impacts throughout the metro area. So how do we as legislators work with cities and counties in a partnership? They aren't stakeholders, they are partners in this with us. And how do we work in a partnership to incentivize regional coordination when it comes to planning and development, and how our state and how their community are going to grow in a harmonious way without really truly going through and impacting another community in a severe manner. And it's not just about, you know, where is the zoning and where is the housing, it's where are you getting your water from? Because I can tell you up in my neck of the woods, and I'm a 4th generation Coloradoan, grew up on a dairy farm. I now live in Weld County. I grew up in Jefferson County. But to have these major metropolitan cities come up and take our agricultural water and impact our way of life up in Weld County, that's not good either. So again, it has to go back to how do we, as a state legislature, work to empower our local communities to do regional planning? And then how do you, as an individual citizen in your community, go in and become empowered and work with your local elected officials to really define your community and define the character of your neighborhood, of your community? That's up to you. That's your job.
Just as an aside, for those of you who are in Denver and who do have citizenship privilege, you got about, I don't know, 6 hours left to turn in your ballots. So right after this, I'm going to go drop off my ballot because, you know, talking about getting involved
Exactly.
in local decisions, there's a big one happening today. So
and they're going to decide
that,
and they're going to decide what Denver's going to look like, because, you know, we aren't governing for today. Whether we're a state senator or a county commissioner or a city council member, you're not governing for today, you are governing for tomorrow. Things that are happening today were decided 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even last year. So you want to make a difference, you want to have influence, go in now. I mean, I can't think of most every city council, most every county commission has the opportunity during their hearings, when they're having their business meetings, for the public to come in and comment. It's a perfect place to go and comment and ask them, look, we don't need to wait. We don't need to wait for the legislature to help us define how do we increase affordable housing in our community. We should be doing that as our community. Let's do it now.
All right, I think we got some calls to action as we close it out. I want to truly thank Senator Gonzales and Senator Kirkmeyer for your engagement today. I think this was such a robust conversation and appreciate both of you bringing your fullest selves to this conversation. And I also want to thank our guests for joining us. We know you could be anywhere else, but we're really happy that you joined us today for this conversation about the legislative session and how you all can engage in your communities to drive systemic change. For those that are participants, look out for an event survey and a ways to gauge email coming to your inboxes soon. So make sure to open that email. And also check out for a link in our chat for our policy newsletter. It's something we put out every quarter, and it's a great resource to stay on top of all the things the foundation's engaging in and what's happening in the policy space. And look out for more interesting topics from the Denver Foundation as a part of our leading and learning sessions. Thank you all again, and have a good rest of your day. And if you're in Denver, remember to vote.
Thank you.
thanks, y'all.